Standing with Our Veterans. In this program, we meet and honor Kenneth Edward Slinde, retired specialist 4th class with the U.S. Army. Ken was born on September the 1st, 1942 in Williston, North Dakota. Married in 1967 to wife Mary, they're both the proud parents of 3 children and grandparents to 8 grandchildren. Ken comes from a Scandinavian heritage and is quite proud of his Norwegian legacy, although he's lived his entire life in this Minnesota land of 10,000 lakes and lutefisk. Ken's wife Mary also comes from a Nordic heritage, being half Swedish and half Norwegian. Going back now to when Ken was just 6 weeks old, he and his family relocated to Butte, Montana, where his father worked for a pharmaceutical company. Then when Ken turned 3, the family moved to Minneapolis, where he spent his childhood and teenage years in South Minneapolis, at a time many of us call the golden age of social interaction, long before the likes of Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
I would tell you that our social interactiveness was with the neighborhood people or with church people. The High Y was a function in the high school, so we had that gang of friends that we did that with. Choir, I sang in an octet, so there were many different venues, but you did it by maybe using the telephone or walking to find somebody. I did not own a car when I was in high school. My friends did, so we had transportation. And our house, we did not have a television set when I was growing up until most of the neighbors had theirs. I used to go to the neighbor's house. It'd be dark and I'd go over and say, "Does Helen want to come out to play?" "Well, no, but the Lone Ranger's starting in 10 minutes. Why don't you come in and watch TV?" And so we weren't the first to get a TV, but we didn't want for anything. And we lived a good life. My sister, 4 years older than I am, she graduated, did not go to college, because to go to college in 1956, it would have been, she said, "You're only going there to get a man. And I've got mine," she said, and she did. And so she was married a year after she got out of high school, which is really the only reason I was able to go to Gustavus, because my parents didn't have to pay for her college education. So, but that was growing up. We played a lot of baseball or hockey or things. They were all not even organized in any way, shape, or form. Had a paper route, did that for quite a while. It's one reason I think I still get up early in the morning. While in college, I dated a woman off and on for virtually all 4 years that I was at school. And when we graduated, she went to California to teach, and so we broke up that summer after we graduated. And because it was about a year before I was going to go in the service, even though I had a college degree, I tried to get into the Naval OCS. The Navy recruiter was a friend of mine, but there were enough reasons why the Navy wasn't going to take me as a naval officer candidate, and so I was drafted into the Army. Basic training took place in Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and it was there that Vietnam was just starting to heat up, and there was my reasoning for wanting to be in the Navy. I'm young, I'm 21 years old, I'm out of college, I'm thinking I'm going to be safer out in the ocean than I am on land, and so that's why I tried that, and so was very blessed to be stationed stateside for the 2 years that I was in the service. I went in as the second largest person, by that I mean fat, in our company of however many men, 300 men. Well, the previous year, before I went into the service, one of the jobs that I had was working for Ham's Brewery. And so there were plenty of calories consumed in that process. And I came out of basic training 3 months later. I was fit and in great shape, felt good. It was wonderful. But basic training is a lot of running, push-ups, sit-ups, crawling, crawling over obstacles and doing the thing that they teach you how to do to become a member of the armed forces. Early on in your basic training, they give you a job that you're going to do, and I sat down with this clerk, and he said, well, you're a college graduate. How did you get drafted? So I told him the story. He said, well, what's your degree in? And I said, biology. And his eyes kind of lit up, and he said, well, he paging through his book, and he said, you've been working in the field for a year, right? No. Master's, you've been working on your master's for a year. No. And the next words out of his mouth, I have never forgotten, were, oh hell, I'm going to put it down anyway. And so it was that I was assigned to the United States Army Aeromedical Research Unit in Fort Rucker, Alabama. Fort Rucker is the aviation center of the U.S. Army. It's where all the helicopters are. It had been moved from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I don't know why, but it was, and we had about 30 people in our unit, and we did medical research. We did a large variety of medical kind of studies, sound pressure levels. There's a lot of noise in a helicopter. Ambient air quality. If you're in a helicopter and there's, 6 weapons firing all at the same time, it fills up with smoke. So you have to test all of that, and you test how pilots. You wire them up to be able to take their temperature. You monitor their heart activity, and on and on and on. And the doctor that I worked for liked to jump out of airplanes. And the paper that I was privileged to get my name put on was the effect of free fall parachuting on the heart. And we worked with the Army parachute team, Navy parachute team, and this is before they had the fancy wing type parachutes that they use today. And it was competitive skydiving in the Army, and it was civilians and military people, and they just had these big old round canopies that they had to steer and practice landing in a certain place. And we would wire these people up, and they'd wear a little, what's called a Holter monitor. But back in those days, it was tape to tape. We had little 3-inch tapes in a little box, about so big, and they wore that on their hip, and if you were hair on your chest, you got shaved, and we put the electrodes on there, and you wore them all day long, and at least once during the day, you jump out of a plane. I will tell you the most interesting part of it for me, aside from the service, was being stationed in the South. I mean, coming here from Minnesota, where in those mid-60s, our non-white population is very small. There was not a black person in the class of 1960 from Washburn High School, not one. And so to be in the South and to be able to witness racism up close, not necessarily, I never saw anything violent, the civilians that we worked with never spoke in racist type tones, but you could tell throughout the Southern society that there was an undercurrent. Most of the blacks lived on one side of town, and the whites lived on another side of town. I went out with one of my co-workers who was a black college graduate, and Alabama at the time they did not have a lot of, you couldn't buy alcohol. There were very few bars. There were select counties. Out of 80 counties, 20 of them were what we called would be wet. So we had to drive, if we didn't drink on base, you had to drive at least 30 miles. And we went to this place. It was a very popular nightclub, bar in front, dance room in the back, big place. And we sat at the bar, and the guy came over, and we ordered 2 beers. And it was busy, but it wasn't crazy busy. And we finished our beers, and we hailed the bar guy and said, 2, I'll be right with you. He never served us again. He never served us a second round of beers. So we left, and I asked Charlie, I said, does this happen a lot? And he said, yes, it does. And I said, I'm so sorry. I have not availed myself of any of the VA medical services because our income level was higher. And I went with the advice of someone else to get hearing aids, and discovered that there was a way that because of the time in helicopters, et cetera, so that I am now able to use the facilities. And while I was out there, particularly doing these hearing tests, I noticed that there were a whole bunch of automobiles that have disabled American veteran stickers all over them. Actually, the cars are wrapped in DAV, and so I inquired about driving. One of the things I did when I quit some of my normal jobs is I drove for Metro Mobility for a couple of years. So I went and asked the question, and they said, oh yes, we have volunteers and we have paid people that are employed by the VA. And I said, well, I'm not interested in a 40-hour-a-week job. Well, the volunteers are down the hall, went there, talked to them, and the DAV runs a service that goes out and picks up veterans and brings them back to the hospital and then takes them home later in the day. And that's what I do, that one day a week. It's about 6 hours. And it's a wonderful operation for people that you do not need to be a disabled vet to avail yourself of the service. I have a very close friend who, let's just say he's very liberal politically. But one time, some years ago, we were talking about the dearth of volunteerism in any form. And he made a comment, this is after the draft had been done away with. He said, you know, he thought it would be a good idea that if we had a mandatory service of some kind, would not necessarily need to be military, could be Peace Corps, could be AmeriCorps, could be Teach for America, whatever it is. And it wouldn't have to be a national deal, it could be local. And I very much agree with that. And the interesting thing about this is his granddaughter just finished her Navy boot training down at Great Lakes Naval Facility in Chicago. And so there are people that are still volunteering to go into the service. I would tell them it's a terribly honorable thing to do. I wish more did that, because whether it's being a cop, a teacher, a member of the armed forces, all of these jobs require a mindset of giving of yourself. And so it is that I think that the 2 years I spent feeling sorry for myself that I wasn't out in the civilian world earning a living certainly helped, in my mind, cement the idea that, hey, it's okay to volunteer. It's okay to do things for other people.